Big shout out to my sponsors this week on this episode. We have BetterHelp for 10% off. All you have to do is go to betterhelp.com/Lori. HelloFresh wants to give you free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/free earn. And Found wants you to try it for free at found.com/earn. And Quince wants you to go to quince.com/earn for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
I think the most important thing is that we have to sign up for the journey. Like, that's the only place you get the stuff that you're looking for. We can't make these decisions. We can't tap into the feelings of the life that we want from the couch. It's about action over intellect and a willingness. There's a formula for how we can do this thoughtfully, meaningfully, to access, again, all of the best stuff in our lives.
Chase, welcome back to the Earn Your Happy podcast.
I am so happy to be here.
Last time.
To be with you again. I love it. I'm grateful. Hey, everybody out there, how you doing? I hope you're well.
Well, this is your right audience because we are a bunch of entrepreneurs, wannabe entrepreneurs, creatives. We struggle to integrate. We just want to create. We want to be bold.
These are my
we want to be daring,
yes.
But we're afraid to be a lot of times.
Yeah.
So, your last book, Creative Calling, was so much fun to chat about.
Thank you.
And I honestly am even more excited for this next one because, man,
wow. Well,
it is the thing. Let's talk about it. You're so excited to be done writing.
Yes.
Tell me why, why this book after the last one?
It was the sophomore experience, right? I guess my first word book was Creative Calling. It did great. It had been, brewing inside me for a long time. And this second book, the second word book, it's called Never Play It Safe. It's about how all the best things in life are on the other side of our comfort zone, on the other side of fear, on the other side of risk. And, culturally, we are taught to play it safe rather than given a roadmap on how to get to all the best stuff. So that's what this book is about. And it is born of the school of hard knocks. And I, like you, have a podcast and have, had 1,000 guests and built a bunch of things and learned a bunch of lessons. And straight up, I've, betrayed who I truly am at my heart and soul lots of times. And I've learned a lot of lessons about that. And it turns out that there's actually a pattern in how to find your way back to yourself and to unlock all of the best stuff in life and the best parts of ourselves. And I've discovered that just enough to be dangerous to help other people experience, but mostly through historical research. And, we have a lot of mutual friends who I think we can both agree are absolutely world-class in so many things. And to be able to learn from them, this book is super well timed. I think just culturally, right? We are at a time where there's a lot of hollow inspiration out there and not a lot of substance. And so to me, there was a little space where I could step in and help people understand how to get to all the best stuff that you see on the internet, because there is a blueprint for doing that.
So good. I was just talking to someone who has teenagers, and she was saying, she's like, it's such a beautiful time to be alive for them and a tough time because they don't see all of the hard work that goes into it and all of just the relationship building and the time that it takes and all of the things behind it. Cause it's just such a instant social media. We just think it happens like that. One of the things that you said that I love, cause I resonate with it so much, is you said, you spent a lot of time betraying yourself to figure it out.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about maybe a story that was one of the first things that you realized that you're like, oh, I feel this way because I'm actually denying a part of myself?
Well, I'm going to give one short story and go all the way back to second grade.
That's where this stuff starts. Chase.
It is Miss Kelly's class. I had the summer between first and second grade. I actually made a film. I screened it. I sold, candy and concessions. It was a profitable film, if you can believe it.
Great job.
So I roll into second grade, feeling pretty dang good about myself. And I had a magic show. I had a stand-up comedy routine, and I had a weekly comic strip. And Miss Kelly shut it all down.
Damn
Told
it,
me that
Miss
I wasn't
Kelly.
creative. Told me that there was no place in school for, businesses, and that I should stick to sports.
Mm.
And so that's what I did. And, you know, before you say boohoo, poor Chase, ironically, it served me well. I went to college on a soccer scholarship. I was the captain of the football team, dated the cheerleader. Essentially, in just that little moment, Miss Kelly told me that I needed to be like everybody else
Mm.
and needed to do the thing that was expected of me. And it didn't feel like a betrayal at the time. It felt like Miss Kelly was trying to help me. And yet that was sort of where it started. And then again, I had a chance to play professional soccer, and I was very far down that path. I went to college on a soccer scholarship, as I mentioned, and was on the Olympic development team. And yet, I was very clear with myself. I wanted to do more than just play soccer. If that's all you've done your whole life, I wrestled with that for a long time. And then when I finally decided to not pursue that, it was really the way I got out of that one is said, "Oh, I'm going to go to medical school." And it was
Mm.
like, "Oh, well, okay, pro athlete sounds better, but at least you're going to be a doctor."
Mm.
And I had no ambitions of being a doctor whatsoever. And so you see this pattern of I'm just going to do whatever makes everybody else happy. And then fast forward $200,000 in student debt. And as the saying goes, if you're, a degree off and you walk that path for 10 years, you're 1,000 miles from home.
Mm.
So that was an early pattern in my life. And then, despite having every advantage, to be clear, I'm white, I'm male, I'm born in America. I came from, lower middle class, but I didn't want for food. I wasn't, food insecure or shelter insecure. And still, this was the hardest thing I'd ever done is tell the world who I actually was and what I
Mm.
actually wanted to do with this one precious life. And so here's the magic of this. This sounds like a horrible, horrible story, right? And yet here I am. And so it's simultaneously like, the book and what I believe we need to hear is that, hey, look, there's no evil overlord, but this is just how these things work. We are social animals. There's so much input telling us who we should be and how we should show up. And we're going to make some mistakes. And yet, all that stuff, the good stuff, it's still in you.
Mm.
And it's never too late. It's never too late to show up as who you really are. And in fact, if we actually turned inside, made this an inside job rather than an outside job, trying to be or become something we're really not, it's actually magically simple. It's not to say it's easy with no work, but the tools that we need to do this are at our fingertips. They all naturally reside within us. So, in a nutshell, and I could give you 100 other tiny betrayals, and I trot a lot of them out in the book, so you won't feel alone in this process. But it's important to know that wherever you are right now, it doesn't actually matter. That's where you are. Let's get you to where you want to be.
Let's talk about that. So do you feel like that is a requirement? Like the betraying yourself is actually a requirement or the mistakes are a requirement to understand? And then what's the mindset that you've created around that so that you can
Mm,
see it that way?
Lori, laser beam question. It's absolutely required in the same way that mistakes are required to learn anything. Right.
Mm.
And this is the challenging part. It's when we're talking about our lives, it's sort of like it's such a loaded topic. And there's a chapter in the book about failure. And this really hits home. And I'm glad that you shared it because when it's about our lives, we really don't give ourselves much room to experiment, to play, to practice,
Mhm.
to take chances, right? We're supposed to know what we want to do when we're a kid. I mean, we start asking our kids that when they're 5 years old. And then you've got, the obvious career track. And here's the school that you have to go to and you have to get these grades to do this job. And yet, if we just paid attention to that, which a lot of us do, we find ourselves doing things that are not suited for us. And the failures feel even worse because we're failing at something we don't even want or we think we want based on just seeing it on Instagram or seeing someone else do it before us. So our view ends up being radically too narrow, and our ability to experiment and, as I said, sort of betray yourself or these just I call them tiny experiments too. It's like, what if you could do a tiny experiment and realize that you didn't want to be a race car driver, even though it sounded fun? Who's out there telling you, you know what? You should go be a race car driver. And
Mhm.
then a couple of years in, you'll figure out this was really interesting or this wasn't interesting, but you've definitely learned something about yourself in the process, and not just that you do or do not want to be a race car driver. You've learned a lot about your character. And I just use that as an example because so many of us, people who are listening right now, I hope you can relate. You've been told you needed to do it a certain way, and it maybe felt incongruent in your heart and your soul. And conversely, when you have done things that lit you up, you feel different. When you're on your mission and you're on your path, boy, the world starts happening for you rather than to you. So, you know, that is the goal, is to start to consider these things as tiny experiments and let failures teach you something quickly. The science on failure is really quick. It is about
Mm.
repetition, but it's repetition with learning something from the previous experience and then applying it to the future. It's not just blind grinding. And you as an entrepreneur know this. We've talked about this kind of stuff. Like, how do you, help your product or your service break through? It's not just you get on the bus and you drive straight to the destination, right? There's all kinds of challenges. And yet, culturally, we don't allow for much of that.
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, the amount that I have had to let it be okay to fail and not consider myself a failure, like, that's the magic sauce right there.
Right.
It's like,
It truly is.
yeah.
This is the cool part. And this is why I'm so grateful to be on your show. You live this. You live this idea of not playing it safe. And to be clear, I'm not talking about sunscreen or seatbelts, and I'm not talking about emotional or physical safety. All those things are important. We don't want a world with no seatbelts. And yet, pretty much everything else is on the other side of uncomfortable decisions, of things that feel awkward in the moment but are required to get there. I mean, again, I'll ask the listeners to go on a little journey. Like, is anything in your life, your partner, your friends, you had to take a risk to do all of it, especially
Mhm.
the stuff that was worthwhile. And I would say is this path that we get conditioned to, the safe path, whether if let's say you want to be an entrepreneur and your parents are pushing you into the 9 to 5 world because they don't understand that it's a fantastic time to trying to, to become an entrepreneur. The tough part is that they love you. They care very deeply and you respect their opinion. And yet they are coaching you through really no fault of their own. It's just the
Mm.
world that we live in, toward a set of beliefs that aren't for you. So when we get pushed in that direction, we either cave and acquiesce to the people who, again, this is why it's confusing, because these people love us very much. Our teachers, our career counselors, our parents, even our spouses and peers and friends, right? And yet, deep down inside, you have a knowing, just
Mhm.
in the same way that you often can get a first read on somebody. This is another one of the chapters in the book is about intuition and training yourself to pay attention to that stuff. That was really hard for me. I did not know that I wanted more than anything to be a photographer, that I had always been curious about it, but it didn't even seem like an option
Mm.
to me. And I bet people who are listening can relate. There's probably something, even if you're not doing it right now, that's okay. But you're probably curious about something. If I could snap my fingers, do this for a day, or if I knew I couldn't fail, those are kinds of questions that we ought to be asking. And in a world that's trying to get us to do the same thing that everybody else is, it's hard to cut through the noise.
Mm. Okay, let's talk about the illusion of safety. And I think that through my journey and through some different people that I've gotten to interview, podcasts are just like the
Of course.
best way of learning. Oh my gosh.
Front row seat, huh?
It's the best. Like, we do it selfishly because we
Totally.
benefit so
I
so
started my
much from
podcast
it.
in 2009. I'm like, I want to
Yes.
learn from people that are smarter than me.
You bring them straight to you. I was
Totally.
like, this is
Exactly.
the best way to network, especially I was mildly introverted before, much less now, but it was just the best thing for that.
Oh, good.
Okay, the illusion of safety. I think
Mm.
for me on my journey, I became a lot more risk tolerant because I understood this earlier on just from like my husband, losing his job and me us losing our home and our cars and money and being in debt so that I understood, oh, that whole thing we thought was safe, that corporate job, this safe, secure job over here, like those are not safe at all. Like the best bet is really on yourself. So I got the gift of learning that early, which came
Mm,
packaged as a hellish experience.
yeah.
But to everyone else who doesn't get that experience or gift, how can we really understand the idea of safety, and
Mm.
that safety is truly an illusion?
Well, first of all, your story is like penultimate. I love it so much. And of course, you had that experience, which is why you're so, smart and talented and resilient because you learned this really early.
Thank
My
you.
hope is that, of course, we're all going to learn lessons in different ways, but in the same way that we don't actually have to touch the hot stove and
Mhm.
get burned, that's hot, we can learn from other people. That's sort of the goal here, right? I'm never going to be able to, through the vehicle of a book, help people not make mistakes or fail or feel the sting when we make a misstep. And yet, what you said is super true. Like, safety is an illusion. That's the first couple words of the book. Safety is an illusion. It does not exist in nature. So why do we seek it?
Mm,
Especially when it's something that can, the pursuit of it is something that keeps us feeling trapped in a life that's not our own. So this idea that you're, picking at here wisely is stuff's going to get hard on
mm,
any path. There's going to be pitfalls, whether you're trying to become a lawyer, an entrepreneur, or you want to open your own coffee stand. It's all risky. It's all
mhm,
difficult. And so the question that we have to ask then is, would you choose a difficult path in service of something that you love, that you know
mm,
you want to be or become? Or would you like to have it be hard and difficult and all of those same things that you experienced on the path of something that is essentially a script written by someone else for your one precious life? And that really is at its foundation. That's the fundamental question I'm asking, because it's all risky. As you said, you thought you had the safe job, did everything by the book. And lo and behold, it didn't quite turn out like everybody told you it would. Or if you went to the right school and you got the right job, there's any number of things that can go south from there. And so, why do we spend time and energy? And most importantly, the question I'm asking is, culturally, why do we do this? I don't
mm,
have to actually come up with the answer, but I think it's an interesting question because it makes us feel more free to chase who we really are and really want to be when we understand that, again, there's no evil overlord, but this is what, let's call it, late stage Western capitalism looks like. We're
mm,
social animals. We're peppered with all these things that we should be. And yet there's usually a gap between what we see and what we truly feel in our heart. And I'm trying to get us not just to go for that, but give a blueprint for how to do it.
mm. Okay, so let's talk about that, because
Mm,
everything good has been a huge risk, and I'm like
you're
just
living
like
it.
living in it right now, and all the things that come with it, which is very, very layered.
Yep.
And I will say, like, you're gonna experience all the things, and a lot of the things that not even a lot, some of the things that you are afraid of will come true, but
Hmm.
they don't happen all at once. It's almost like God is up there like, "Hey, I'm gonna throw you some curveballs, but they're not okay, some of them are all at once, but it's kind of like you're able to handle them as they come." So let's talk about, I think there's just so much fear
Yeah.
around risk if they
Yep.
haven't seen it.
Yep.
What are some of the first things that we can start to do to start being like
Mhm.
taking that first step into something new?
Well, let's be clear. The world's job is to actually throw you curveballs until you
Yes.
learn to hit them, right? This is why a shift in mindset, to sort of address a question that you hinted at earlier, a shift in mindset is not just helpful, it's core to all of this. And that comes in lots of forms. And one of the forms that I'm a huge advocate for is learning to pay attention, right? We believe in our culture, it's all about getting attention, like pay attention to me, more followers, more likes, buy my service or product. And yet, the very act of actually paying attention, of
Mm,
learning to direct this one precious resource, right? The quality of your attention equals the quality of your life. Like, there's no difference. What you pay attention to expands. And if you choose to see the world as a hard, difficult, miserable place, just like Brene Brown says, you're going to find what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
By contrast, if you see this as a challenge, an opportunity to grow, a chance for learning, get a little taste of failure, build up some muscles where we need a little bit more skill and a little bit more resilience, then that's the way you see the world. The world starts happening for you rather than to you. So, there are a handful of tools. The way I set this book up is that there's specifically 7 tools that reside naturally within us. And it's easiest seen through the lens of, say, our creativity. You ask any first grade class, who wants to come to the front of the room and draw me a picture? Every hand goes up. And then if you ask that same question, as an 8th grader or a 12th grader, the number just dramatically increases because we see that culturally creativity is sort of it's nice to say, but
Mm-hmm.
if to encourage people to really explore their creativity, it is less accepted than most. And I have a belief that the same is true with 7 other tools that reside naturally within us. Attention is one of them. And learning to direct it is incredibly powerful. That's the mindset stuff that you were talking about, this resilience, for example, but also things like our intuition. Our intuition is arguably the most valuable, precious, important thing that we know the least about. We all know we have it. We've felt it before. Every single person who's listening or watching right now has had that gut feeling that this is going to be a good thing, or man, I might need to watch out, or this relationship could be suspect or whatever. And learning to hone and trust that is not something we're taught, and yet the science is increasingly clear that actually your gut feeling is every bit, if not more valuable than rational thought. Now you can say, hey, rational thought help us build tools and get out of the cave. I get it. And yet what we know from science is that rational thought is sort of slow and is prone to fumbling, and intuition is infinitely quicker, right? That feeling, man, and it's in the body. That's why they call it a gut feeling. So whether it's learning to direct our attention or listen to our intuition, or there's another really important tool on failing. We already talked about that, like the ability to fail quickly and gracefully, and not in the internet sort of fail like with a small f. If you're not risking anything, it's not really you know
True.
that valuable. And so, I think the most important part is, again, go back to the top of the hour. This is an inside game, and learning to take risks and to access the stuff that's on the other side of fear is a knowable, learnable skill. And the way we do it is essentially we go to the gym. There's a handful of basic exercises and an awareness that we can have. And just like you were talking about being in it right now and how much smarter and more resilient you were because of that experience you had early in life, you are a living example of it. And again, this is the benefit of a couple of podcast hosts here talking. We get to run around with people that do this. And I admit there's a certain amount of osmosis and a certain amount of courage that we get being in contact with folks like this. And this is why, your circle of friends matters. My message is all of this stuff is learnable and knowable, and it exists naturally within you. So let's tap into that and get you more free, more creative, and onto your goals.
I love this because so many people always ask the question of like, how do you get more confident? How do you do the thing? And I'm like, there is a guide to follow. There are things that you do because it is very actionable. It is
Yes.
like taking action steps,
Yeah.
listening,
It's literally
looking at
called
the data.
a practical guide. Like
Yes.
that's a real, that's a fact of the book. And this is part of, a lifetime of experience. I'm not saying I got it all figured out, but
Mhm.
when you start to see the patterns that exist in the failures, the successes, and I would say arguably the most important part, people who feel fulfilled,
Mm,
you can't unsee those patterns after a while, right? They're there hiding in plain sight. And
yeah.
my goal is to help people not just access them, but take action against them.
Okay. So, question, I get this one all the time, and
All
it's
right.
just like it's all over the board, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. When you're taking risks and when you're doing something new, a lot of times the gut is just like, no, like you can't
Right.
quite tell the difference between
Sure.
intuition and just like what your innate, like trying to stay safe and
Yep.
not be, killed off because you're
Yep.
leaving your group of people.
Totally. Totally.
So
Well,
for me,
there's
this one is still,
got it.
it's like as much as I feel like I know my intuition, it's like I also am like, oh, that feels bad, even though it could be the right thing. So
Right.
just
Right.
ain't feeling good.
Classic question. And my answer is, I would say, similarly classic, but proven to be true, scientifically, factually.
This podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. And you guys, I'm going to relate this back to business because if you have big dreams, if you have big goals, if you've started a business, if you have a business, let me just tell you, it is the biggest personal development that you will ever do in your life. Whether it is going to post on social and it's bringing up all of these different triggers and you're worried and you're afraid of judgment, or you don't even know who you are when you go to post, you don't know what to talk about, you don't know how to make it authentic. I'm telling you, therapy can help you tap into all of that and work through what's coming up for you and what's triggering you around all of it. I am obsessed with having coaches. I am obsessed with therapy. I am obsessed with talking through my experience. So you guys, truly, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. So it's like one of the best and easiest ways to dip your toe in, because BetterHelp is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover who you are with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Lori today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Lori. And you guys, seriously, go and check it out. Every single person that I know who is super successful either has a coach or a therapist. All right, let's get back to the show. Hey, podcast lovers, I'm going to tell you about another podcast. Starting a business can feel really hard, and growing a business can be even harder. Like, how do you talk about your products without sounding salesy? How can you maintain the quality of your products as you scale? And how do you know if you're actually ready for the next step? Well, there's a great podcast that can help you with all of that, and it is called This is Small Business. There's a recent episode called From Concept to Reality, Building and Validating Your Business Idea, and it talks all about this. So if you're stuck in the ideation phase, you'll learn how to come up with and evaluate your ideas, decide if they're worth pursuing, and what it takes to turn them into successful businesses. And host Andrea Marquez is joined by none other than Ray Phillip, the CEO of Soapbox, who shares his own entrepreneurial journey, which includes a feature on Shark Tank, and Morgan DuBois, the founder and CEO of Blavity. So, this episode has some great advice that'll give you the confidence to start or keep building your business. You can go listen right now. This is Small Business answers so many of these kinds of questions that we all have. Whether you're dreaming of starting your business, looking to take a part-time side hustle on full-time, or maybe you're a few years in and you're ready to grow. This show covers it all, like tips to accelerate small business growth, how to build your marketing strategy, and tons more. Learn more about how to start and grow your small business. Check out This is Small Business, an original podcast from Amazon on your favorite podcast app. And big thanks to This is Small Business for sponsoring the show. I'm interrupting the show to ask you a question. Have you ever wanted to launch or upgrade your own online store? Well, you can do it right now for just $1. This podcast episode is brought to you by Shopify, the #1 e-commerce platform for all businesses. I've used Shopify for over a year, and it is the only platform that I trust for Glossy. You guys, when we were looking for what platform to use for our entire experience for Glossy online, for our customer, our checkout experience, we looked at so many of our North Star brands that we really looked up to. And we also looked at some of the most successful brands in the world, and they were all using Shopify. And let me tell you that when we dug deeper, it is for a reason. They can not only support you in the most incredible way in the early stages of launching your business and company, but also up to billions and billions of dollars, some of the biggest brands. So everyone from brand new businesses to Kylie Jenner has used Shopify. So, Shopify can support all sizes of businesses and the big goals you have for yours. I definitely like the fact that I am in good company with billion-dollar brands using the same e-commerce platform. Literally millions of businesses like mine trust Shopify to manage their online stores. so you can upgrade your business and get the same checkout experience as Kylie Jenner, as Crate and Barrel, and Rebecca Minkoff. You guys, I would say that this is a great platform to be on. So sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/happy. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/happy to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/happy.
The goal is to develop these senses, right?
Mhm.
To further develop your intuition by taking lightweight risks. The goal is not to, you don't have to move to France, get a new set of friends, blow up your life. That's not what I'm asking. What I'm suggesting is that there are lightweight ways that you can get comfortable being uncomfortable, that you can decide overtly to listen to your intuition and see how it works or go against it. Doing this when your life is on the line is not a great place to start. And so, like anything, right? If there's the example that I like to reference here, there's a lot of people in the listenership who probably have kids. And when your child stumbled for the 139th time, and if this child was able bodied, did you at that point say, guess my kid's not a walker?
Mm.
You know, I think we're done trying. No way. No way. Because
Mhm.
it's a natural, that's a natural component of mobility for an able-bodied human. And all these other things are just the same. It is our
Mhm.
natural state to be able to direct our attention on things that matter to us. It is our natural state. We have intuition for a reason because we're supposed to listen to it. Now, what is it and what is that fear monkey mind? The goal is to run some tiny experiments on both, not in a moment of life or death. I lay out a few examples in the book, but this stuff is knowable. And just like, I mean, you and Chris are both, exercise phenoms. You're in excellent shape. And it's because you practice the act of moving your body and staying fit.
Mhm.
The alternative is the people who would say, well, I'll go work out when I'm fit.
Mm.
It just
Mhm.
I'll
That
take
is the same thing. I'll do it when
I'll
I'm
take
nice.
chances when everything around me will be safe.
Mhm.
And that's actually the antithesis of the act of taking a risk. The goal is not to bet it all on black. And if you ask any, entrepreneur, I know Tony Robbins, a friend of mine, and you've had him on your show. I've had him on mine. I've done stuff with Tony, walked on fire with him.
Mhm.
And Richard Branson is another example. People look at those guys and they say, wow, they've taken all these risks. And well, Richard Branson is a business mentor, a friend. He invested in my last company. And I'll tell you, this is one of the things that he shared with me. He said, when I started Virgin, it's very true that the first airplane I bought was a Boeing 747,
Mm.
which to people on the outside, who does that? Who just goes out and cold turkey buys a 747 and starts flying it from New York to London? Like that's crazy. It's like, but what people don't know is that I had pre-negotiated with Boeing the price that they were going to buy it back if it didn't work, or in fact, when it didn't work, because I wasn't all that sure it was going to work.
Mm.
And so I think the perception of entrepreneurs is that, you have to go all in. And yet, that is not actually the behavior of most. Now, when you have your back on the wall and you have burned the boats, certainly there's some extra fuel there. But when you're trying to develop the muscle, which is what we're talking about here, like how do you get good at listening to your intuition and knowing that from fear? It's protecting the downside. It's doing so in lightweight ways, developing that muscle, learning to trust it, and then repeating this and making this a practice in your life. Now, it's sort of a long answer, but I'm going to put a pin in one thing, this final thing here, which, I've highlighted a couple of the tools that I talk about in the book. We talked about attention, intuition, for example, the tool of learning how to fail. There's another one which is really important, and that is the art of practice.
Mm.
Go back to the gym thing, right? Can you get strong without a weight training practice?
Mm.
Like very simple to answer. No one thinks you can. No one thinks you go to the gym once, get strong, and you're good.
Mhm.
Can you stand on your head with your legs split in some crazy yoga pose? No, that's why they call it a yoga practice, right? You
Yeah.
have to practice this stuff in order to get good. And, to the point that you made earlier, the world is very confusing to our reptilian brains right now because we can pick up our phone and in a millisecond scroll to anybody who's the best in the world doing their thing in near real time,
Hmm.
24/7 in any endeavor. Now, let's go back 20, 30, some odd thousand years when we were living in tribes. The beautiful thing about that was you saw somebody, let's say you saw Jane become a great hunter. You saw her start to, go out hunting and come back empty handed, go out, come back empty handed. Then she was able to kill a small animal. And then she was able to kill a bigger animal. And then pretty soon, Jane's the badass hunter of the tribe. But you saw that happen over the course of how much time it really happened.
Hmm.
In today's world, we pick up a phone and we see the best in the world do it effortlessly immediately. So it has messed with our
Totally.
awareness of what it takes to be great. And so, again, this book is a permission slip to not be great right away and is a roadmap for how to actually become great and to maintain the mindset and a handful of these other really important attributes along the way.
Oh my goodness, I love that. It's so vital for people. It's vital for just being able to put yourself out there
Yeah,
and like let it be okay to be judged or all of the things. Like it is sloppy in the beginning. It is like
totally.
I always tell people when they want to start a podcast, I'm like, go back to my first episode and you'll start your podcast
There
that
you
day.
go.
Like it's so bad. Like I'm like,
Right.
you'll feel so good about it. Go find all the first like go Google this video that I did in 19 whatever it was. But truly,
It's so
it's
true, right? And it's true with everything, and that's the thing
yes.
that we lose track of. And so
Mhm.
I'm here to humbly remind you about that. And on the other side of that same coin, that has this profound effect of setting you free. You're like, bring it on. Okay. Okay. I'm
Totally.
willing to do this. And again, with a little bit of structure, the goal is not to just dive in the deep end of the pool, but you'd be surprised how fast this stuff takes hold because again, it's not something you have to seek out there. It isn't a bigger bicep,
Mhm.
right? This is learning to trust your intuition. You can trust your intuition today, one time, just immediately. And then you can do it again and again and again, and you'll hone that muscle. It's not an outside game, it's an inside one, which makes it so, it's like a catapult. When you start doing this, it's a very powerful medicine. I'll leave it at that.
Mhm. Okay, my next question is not fully formed, but I want to
Great.
ask
I
it.
like it
So
in
let's see if I
process.
can work let's see
Great.
if I can work through it because I've
Okay.
actually felt both ways that I'm about to say.
Okay.
So you had kind of said something about like protecting the downside or preparing for the downside.
Mhm.
I now
Mhm.
like when I do something, I think about, okay, can I be okay with worst case scenario if this happens? And I
Beautiful.
like actually prepare myself for it and allow myself to go through it and know what I'll do and know who I have. A lot of that
Mhm.
is like, who do I have? Who would still be on my team? Who would I go to? Who would I talk to like pull me out of the depths of hell if I like
Yep.
lose all these people's money or whatever that looks like? But I will say, when Chris and I had lost everything, I didn't actually do that. And I didn't let failure be an option.
Mhm.
But if I would not have let failure be an option, like in order for me to let it be an option and go there and get back to a place where I could be creative in this new
Yep.
company where I can even get ideas and not be paralyzed in fear, I
Mhm.
had to do that. So help me out with like,
Sure.
can,
I get it.
can both be powerful? What do we need?
Not only can both be powerful, but they're both true. They're both real. They
Mhm.
both happen and they're essential to the process. So I think it's a really insightful question. And here's a little deeper. So
Okay.
specifically, the process of understanding, of intellectual awareness of what's possible with failure, that's
Mm,
very constructive because it helps you actually prepare in the moment. For example, if I am learning to slackline and walk on this rope, I'm probably going to fall.
mm.
So I can practice the first time at 35 feet off the ground, or I can practice at 12 inches off the ground with the crash pad there.
Mhm.
And you're realizing what failure could look like. And then you're adjusting especially early on in the game. And if you're aware of this, for example, I do not recommend that most people who have never had an entrepreneurial bone in their body, didn't open a lemonade stand, didn't sell golf balls at the golf course, always had a 9 to 5 job or whatever. I do not suggest that you go from zero to raising $100 million and
Mhm.
running a venture backed $1 billion company. I do not recommend it.
Mhm.
And to say so, it sounds obvious and we can chuckle. And yet, that is a similar exploration of the question that you're talking about. Like, I know I do go to like, what's the worst case scenario? Okay. Well, the worst case scenario in that place is that everybody, knows that you have a certain disposition to failure, you'll swing big and you lost $100 million, which is not a great place to start. By contrast, if you're aware of, okay, this is a hard thing. If it was easy, everyone would do it. What does it look like to start in small, lightweight ways? It's not bet every ounce of your life savings on the first thing. It's let's build some muscles. And simultaneously, if you are in a position and wherever you are, there's someone listening to this right now that actually is in that position where they have nothing else and failure is not an option. Good for you because that's going to bring out the absolute very best in you.
Mhm.
I just wouldn't seek that as my first exposure. Just like mountain climbing, you don't go from, walking up your neighborhood hill to Mount Everest. And yet if you found yourself on Everest, a little fight in you would be good.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
both of these things, this is the part about, and I think, anything, whether it's entrepreneurship or, just charting a course of who you want to be and what you want to become, there's a lot of these dualisms where both things are true. And when you examine them, the both things are usually the extreme on both ends of the spectrum. And yet those extremes are very rare and I would say few and far between. So let's be aware of them, bring them. I like to talk about putting everything you've got in your backpack and showing up. You want to have all of the experiences and tools, and yet you need to practice like anything, whether you're learning to walk, you're going to look goofy the first time you do a stand-up comedy routine, whatever your passion's going to be, you absolutely cannot get there without being a beginner, or you absolutely cannot get there without disappointing some people along the way, being misunderstood. These are
Mm.
things that as an entrepreneur that are so loaded culturally. And yet, I'll never forget this. Brene Brown told this great story. She's been on my podcast many times. A great story that she told way back in like maybe 2011, 10, 11. I said, how do you decide what you're going to do and who matters and who doesn't? And she
Mm.
said, hey, can you grab my purse over there? And one of the people who were on set brought the purse to her. It was a live studio audience and everything. And she took out of her purse, she took her wallet. And out of her wallet, she took a little piece of paper. She unfolded this piece of paper. And on this piece of paper, a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of paper, she held it up and she said, on this piece of paper are the names of everybody whose opinions of me actually, truly, truly matter to me.
Mm.
Everyone else, I realize it would be nice to impress them, but this list is really what matters. And this is an homage to a quote, a Theodore Roosevelt quote from called the Man in the Arena quote, which essentially is, hey, if you're doing stuff that's hard and difficult, you really only want to pay attention to the other people who are actually doing hard, difficult stuff and have experience in the same arena that you're in.
Mhm.
And by contrast, listen to people in the cheap seats. Like, you're going to go nuts if you spend too much time, paying attention to that. So, again, all of these lessons, my hope is that in answer to your question, lots of things can be true at the same time, and it doesn't change the formula for how you get there.
Mhm. Can you tell me about a story for you that felt that way, that was like, oh my goodness, maybe it was someone just where you were either misunderstood
Mm,
or it was a really challenging experience for you? Maybe it was around your character or something
sure.
like that when you take risks.
Mm,
If you follow me, you guys know that I love fashion and things in the home. That's why I'm so excited about Quince. And if you're shifting your wardrobe like I am right now from summer to fall, it's always a bit of a challenge. And I love high quality items. And I also don't want to blow my budget because I love new things often. I'm so sorry. You guys, Quince has things like cashmere sweaters from $50, pants for every occasion, washable silk tops, and so much more. And the best part is, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than other brands because they partner directly with top factories. So Quince cuts the cost of the middleman, and they only work with factories that use ethical and responsible manufacturing practices. I just got their bed sheets, and I have to tell you, I love how freaking soft they are and how cool they keep me at night. So make switching seasons a breeze with Quince high quality closet essentials. Go to quince.com/earn for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/earn to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/earn. I want to take a minute to tell you about Found. Most of you are business owners who listen to this podcast, and imagine if you no longer needed 5 separate apps for your business bank account, your expense tracking, your invoicing, your contractor payments, and your tax planning. And now there's one that does it all, and that is Found. Found is business banking designed for small business owners just like you. I love the automatic expense tracking because I am horrible at saving receipts, especially while I'm traveling, and keeping track of my bank statements. You guys, there are so many awesome testimonials about Found. And Trustpilot says, I've never seen an app for freelancers, contractors, and business owners that has everything they need with such automation. So you can try Found for free at found.com/earn, and you can sign up for Found for free today at found.com/earned. That's FOUND.com/earn. Found is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services are provided by Piermont Bank, member FDIC. Found's score features are free. They also offer an optional paid product, Found Plus. You guys, let's get back to the show. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that my husband and I are huge takeout people. Like, all we do is get our meals out because by the time the day is over, we are so exhausted. And living in California, we have some pretty decent options. But I have to tell you, recently we spent 2 months in Wisconsin at our lake house, and we were grilling out like every single night because they really don't have DoorDash there. So what we noticed is that we just felt so much better cooking meals at home. Except the downfall was that, again, I'm tired. It's exhausting. I don't know what to cook every single night. And that is why Chris and I decided to try HelloFresh. HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. So you also can skip the trips to the grocery store, and you can count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. And can we say that you get to save on the tips as well? So we all know home cooked meals are so much better for you, but we don't always have the time to pull it off. But with HelloFresh handling all the meal planning, shopping, and most of the prep, it's super easy to get dinner on the table in a quick and painless way. So the coolest part is that it's easily customizable. You can customize your meals with protein or veggie swaps. And don't forget to check out HelloFresh Market for more delicious add-on items to jazz up your weekly deliveries. So you guys, this is so cool because HelloFresh is offering free breakfast for life if you go to HelloFresh.com/free-earn. One free breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to HelloFresh.com/free-earn. FREEEARN. Free earn.
Yeah, I'll tell you an example, and this is an entrepreneurial example for the because your audience is largely creative and entrepreneurial. So in 2010, I started a company called Creative Live, and it was the first live streaming learning platform out there. And it was focused specifically for creators and entrepreneurs, had amazing people on the platform. Damon John, Mark Cuban had been on the show, Richard Branson. Richard was an investor. It had, absolutely blue chip investors. We raised about $60 million But before we'd done any of this, we realized that, man, let's actually start this company. It's interesting. Have the world's top experts teach live,
Mm,
and let's see how it goes. Well, we caught a tiger by the tail, and it's hard to think about this, but it was 2010,
mhm,
and we had classes that had 150,000 people in. I mean, we had, we were making money hand and fist from day one. The very first class we ever had made, I think $150,000 in 36 hours.
mhm,
And it only went up from there. And so I was like, wow, cool. We got this thing. Let's grow this. So I grew it a little bit. And then when it started to get into a universe where I was not comfortable, I'm like, okay, cool. We were already getting never work again, like money thrown at us 18 months into this journey of
mm,
just building. And I was like, well, never work again money is really nice, but if we've only been doing this for a year and change, like let's keep going. So at that point, I had, I think, the I'll call it wisdom to reach out to some people. We brought in investors, the stuff that I mentioned earlier, and hired a CEO who had, built multi-$100 million companies and exited and sold them, and brought on the best venture capitalists in the world, the people that started Facebook and LinkedIn and absolute blue chip. And yet, after a couple of years and a lot of investment, we found the company basically heading for a wall.
mm,
And so I had a decision to make. Was I going to come back and lead the company again, despite having zero experience ever being a venture backed CEO?
mm,
I was very well known in the commercial photography space, had a team of 10 or 15 people, traveled all the world, very well known for that. But we're talking a team of hundreds, venture backed, board of directors, all of this stuff. I was very uncomfortable. And yet it's sort of like, what would you do? We don't have kids, my wife and I. So the business was, if a business could take the form of a kid, like, well, what would you do? I would do
mm,
everything to save it. So radical act of discomfort. I step into this role, and after, I don't want to, what Brene calls, I don't want to gold plated grit this thing, but let's just fast forward after a few years, completely turn the company around. And I'm thinking, this is what it means. It's hard. You work hard, you figure it out. Good things happen to good people. And after, I remember distinctly, like it was yesterday, we had an all hands meeting. We told the company about it, and I had a board meeting the next day, a board dinner that night, and a board meeting the day after. And we were reviewing the results of essentially my turnaround.
mm,
And I say mine only because I'm trying to own both the successes and the failures. But to be clear, it was, hundreds of people worked really hard. We transitioned out fired a bunch of people. I mean, it's really difficult business. At that meeting with my lead investor, we were doing $36 million run rate. We had our first $3 million month, doing 36 million run rate and growing 40% year over year.
mm,
I'm thinking, this is a dunk. This is like, look at me now, mom, check me out. And I'll never forget, my investor looked at me, and I shared the news and thinking about, okay, so do we go raise another round, try to get a, a $500 million valuation instead of, I don't remember what we're at, some, definitely six-figure valuation already. And, or sorry, nine-figure. And he said, it's just not that interesting. I like the business. It's, it's heading the right direction, but it's just not very interesting.
mm,
And in that moment, again, this is the arc that we're all on. It went from, this is a great business, to, oh my gosh, we don't have a leader, to, I will reluctantly take this leadership role. I figured it out. It was very hard. It was work that I'm not naturally good at. And I figured it out. And oh my goodness, we're winning. And the very next day, I was losing.
mm,
And my lead investor was no longer interested in, continuing to fund the growth of the company.
mm,
So, you know, I say this as there are 100 lessons that I learned in there.
mm,
Every time was a risk. And on the other side of that risk were the absolute best lessons of my life. Like you said, it's when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see how it feels good. When you were losing all of that money early on in your career and you went broke, I think you call it, you had a really good phrase for it. It was a beautiful disaster or something. And yet it absolutely made what you're doing now to level not just of success, but of growth and fulfillment, it made that possible. So whether an entrepreneurial and for what it's worth, the company, we did go on to grow it, and it was acquired by a big public company a few years later. But that told me I'm no longer aligned with the goals of this investor group, and we need to find a way to make it profitable and find a great place for the next chapter of this company inside some big public company. And we did that. So again, that was a another radical learning experience to go through being acquired by a public company, and then me, goofy artist, creative me, being an executive at that company. So whether it's an entrepreneurial journey or a personal one, I think the most important thing is that we have to sign up for the journey. Like, that's the only place you get the stuff that you're looking for.
Mm,
We can't make these decisions. We can't tap into the feelings of the life that we want from the couch. It's
mm.
about action over intellect and a willingness to, again, this is not a bet it all on black. There's a formula for how we can do this thoughtfully, meaningfully, to access, again, all of the best stuff in our lives.
Oh my God, what a ride. What what a
Oh, and I'll
crazy
tell you the rest of the details later, but Zowie, like, that's the short
ride.
version. And I share a lot of those stories. I do think it's important. I hate business books that say do super smart
Yep.
thing A, super smart thing B, and then C, and then everything is going to be awesome D. That's not how business works. I mean,
No.
just deconstruct your journey, or any of the other friends that we've talked about in as podcast hosts. It's like, if it was easy, everybody do it. If it was only one direction, everybody do it. But the chance, what we get to do, what we
Mhm.
get to do is develop our tools to take us where we want to go.
Oh my gosh, so good. So let's end on this question,
Okay.
because I just feel like from everything that you've talked about and just like the experience of it and needing to practice and give it time and all of the different things that are, you guys, all of these tips and the way and the framework and everything is literally in the book. So you're not
Mhm.
just like, "Whoa, go take a risk." It's like, here's how you are able to start living a more bold, risky, which is what you have to do,
Totally creative
life.
life. Yeah.
Um but how are you, and I know you're going through a lot of personal things right now,
Yeah.
but how are you compartmentalizing that ride that you just said? Because I know simultaneously to the ride that you just said and the ride that you're on right now,
Totally.
you are still learning to find joy. And I know you have a lot going on, and yet you're still
Sure.
present here with us and the
Yeah.
podcast listeners to be amazing and giving value and all of these things.
Mm,
Like, and that is the ride of life, right? Like,
absolutely.
things are tough while things can still be good. How do you do that?
It's also sort of, to me, it's an awareness thing. It's knowing that this is actually part of what we're signing up for.
Mm,
And to me, that makes it, for some reason, that makes it easier to manage, and also simultaneously helps us not feel alone. For everyone who's listening, I was just sharing with Lori before we started recording that my mom's real sick right now, real
mhm,
sick. It's coming. I'm sharing about my new book that I've been working on for years, and it's out now. So it's sort of like the craziest 8 weeks of the last, several years, and how difficult that is. And simultaneously, it's made me, super present. And this is another, set of lessons that I've learned and have researched through historical examples, and honestly, ordinary people who've done extraordinary things, a lot like me. Sort of like, the more you do, the better you get.
mm,
And if you have practices that are moving you in the direction of getting better at stuff that you want to be getting better at, that's valuable. Or we've all had friends that have, lost their way, and they're getting better at things that you don't want to get better at.
mhm,
And so, to me, the awareness about this, and that, again, the 7 tools that I put in this book that are naturally inside of every person, that's what this is about. It is an inside game.
mm.
And there is a way to make this playful and joyful, despite, we're talking about some heavy stuff here with my mom, and with, you know, making companies that are go from the verge of bankruptcy to making hundreds of millions of dollars. Like,
Mm,
it's all a roller coaster ride. And if we can have a little perspective, and if we can realize that this is actually what we signed up for, we think we want an easy path. But what sort of an experience would that create? It would create the dullest,
Mhm.
like not realistic life. And so this cultural programming that says that this is what we ought to seek, it's a myth, and don't get sucked into it. Realize that all of the best stuff in life is on the other side of your comfort zone, that the people you respect, admire, and look up to, they have had to do this and more to get to the level, to experience the experiences and do the things that they've done. And let's just decide not to make it different for you. Let's welcome all of this stuff in the process.
Mm. I love that, and truly, when I think, you're bringing me just back through my whole journey, which I know you're doing that for the listeners too right now. It's all of the risks that have made it fun. It's like, it's not, what fun is it if you're not excited or hopeful or, "Ooh, things could be different, or it could go this way, or it
Where
could go that way."
there's nothing on the line. There's no stakes,
So boring.
right? So boring. And
Yeah.
yet that's the sort of the life that we are taught to seek. And you try that for too long and you realize that, boy, and this is so, another reason that we ought to get, I think it's natural that we would want to solve all our big challenges from the couch or from behind the screen, because if you don't have to put it all out there, but you can get all the stuff,
Mm.
why wouldn't you?
Mhm.
Well, the answer is, first of all, you can't get all the stuff without putting it out there.
Mhm.
And the rest of that answer is, and even if you could, you shouldn't want it. Let's go. Let's move you in the direction of your dreams. There's a way to do it. There's a way that the people who've come before you, the people you respect and admire, that they're doing it, and it's available to you right now.
Mhm. So good. Anything else you want
Oh,
to share before we go? About a million things, but
oh,
anything
about a
that's like
million
up
things.
right here.
I am a lifelong visual artist. I've created, television shows, directed, films, and a lifelong photographer, shot
Mm.
campaigns all over the world for the many of the world's top brands. And so I'm very visual. So the act of writing, again,
Mm.
this is I've done a couple word books. My last one, Creative Calling, as you mentioned, was a instant bestseller, and I got just a taste of the good stuff. But I'm telling you, writing books is not my natural state. Getting to share about them, and the research, painstaking research. And I will share that I was writing a different book at the beginning
Mm.
of my book contract with Harper, and it was a tidy business and creativity book. Would have sold well, I believe. And yet, with just a couple months before my deadline, I couldn't not pursue this. And
Mm.
I have the best agent in the business, and thankfully Steve had my back. And this is the book that I wished that I had had when I was going through some of my earlier adventures. And so I hope you
Mhm.
find value and joy in reading it. There's a lot of folks that probably have been on your podcast that are featured in the book, and a bunch of new people that they might not be familiar with, and historical examples too. So I've had a great time getting to talk about it, despite all the stuff that's going on in my life right now. I wouldn't trade any of it, and just grateful to be with you. Congrats on you. Honestly, you've been doing so much fascinating stuff. I consider you and your hubby Chris a friend, each
Mm.
of you, and to watch. You're right next to each other in my scroll in my feed, and I always get so much joy and wisdom in y'all's adventures and lessons. And I'm just so excited about the stuff you're building. Thank you so much for
Mm.
having me on the show and getting to share with your community.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing. Thank you so much for that. And truly, I love this book, and that you took the time to write a word book. You only talk It's only when you're talking to a creative that he calls it a word book, because he's done so many
There's a lot
awesome
of words in
other.
that book.
Yeah, exactly.
65,000 of
Um,
them.
but it's a life, like, this book is amazing because it is a true life theme. Like, it's a life law. Like, risk is a
Yeah.
part of life that you will have to, like, learn to fall in love with. And
Yep.
that's, I know that throughout the book you talk a lot about, like, this theme of playfulness with it as
Yep.
well. And I think that, if I look at you in your life, like, keeping it light and keeping it fun, despite knowing that, the more blessings you get and the bigger businesses you have, the
Yep.
heavier it can be. So I just, like, you guys have to get
Mhm.
this book. It should be required reading.
Oh, thank
So
you, Lori.
where can we find
Yeah,
it? All the
wherever books
usual
are
book
sold,
spots.
wherever books are sold, of course, Amazon, your local bookstore, They've all got it. And I am right now when this podcast drops, if you go to chasejarvis.com, which is just my name, there's some pretty insane bonuses with
Mm.
just purchasing a single copy. There's access to masterclass with me on creativity. There's a launch event that has some absolute iconic legends showing up to support the book and inspire and educate as well. There's some creative performances that are happening. And there's just, I think it's like $700 worth of extra stuff just for buying I don't know what it costs, $30 or something like that. So that's the only other place I'd steer you. And I'm just Chase Jarvis everywhere on the internet, whether that's Insta or YouTube or X or Twitter, whatever the hell they call it anymore.
Cool. Amazing. You guys, and we're going to do a fun little 10 book giveaway for you guys. So
Oh.
we're going to do to whomever tags you, Chase, and myself and says the biggest takeaway on
Mm.
Instagram. So just go screenshot this podcast right now that you're listening to, go tag Chase and myself and let him know what your biggest takeaway was
Oh, I
from
can't
this
wait.
podcast. And then the first 10 people who upload those stories, we will send a book to. So it's always so much fun. And you guys, the biggest thing you can do for an author, number one, go read their book, but share it. If there's a creative in your life, if you need to take more risks, truly this book is incredible because
Mm.
you, in order to do your dream that you're thinking of right now, there will be so many new things involved, which will feel risky. So Chase, thank you so much for coming back on the
Oh,
show and just
your
for sharing the
skills,
way that you
your
do.
skills as a host are just
Stop,
supreme. They're
stop,
supreme.
stop,
Yeah,
go on.
exactly. Awesome. Thank you, friends, so much for having me on the show. Love your community. And again, I'm just out Chase Jarvis. Feel free to hit me up and I will do everything in my power to respond to anybody who's out there.
You're amazing. Thank you so much. And you guys, until next time, earn your happy. Bye, everyone.